What's up everyone, Wonderful here. This time, I'm reviewing the draft sets from the past few years and putting them on the tier list. The reason I want to do this video is because of the upcoming set Marvel Spider-Man / Through the Omen Paths. If I am to talk about this Spider-Man set, it will be an entire new video long. Long story short, the Spider-Man set is a set that Wizards of the Coast has to urgently expand from a small set to a draftable set with the newly introduced Pick 2 draft format for 4 players so the draft can be functional. Outside of gameplay, Wizards also have to change most of the card names and all of the card arts for the digital platforms because they do not have the license of Spider-Man online. This resulted in many cards having completely different names and art but the same functionality, confusing standard players and limited players alike. I'm pretty skeptical about this pick 2 shenanigans compared to the traditional 8-player draft, especially with the emergent expansion of a previously undraftable small set. Therefore, there's a chance I stop doing standard draft for a while if I find this format unenjoyable, and it makes me want to look back to the past draft sets and review what happened in each set and how fun it was to play each of them. I start doing lots of paper drafts and on Arena since Dominaria United, and that's why I want to start with this set. I only want to cover sets I'm familiar with, so the sets has to be featured on both paper and Arena. With this criteria, I will be covering 17 sets all the way from Dominaria United to Edge of Eternity. If I have to talk about all these sets in one video, the video would be way too long, so for this reason, I'm only covering 2 sets for each video, so the videos won't be too long and I can save myself some sanity. Without further ado, let's start with the first set. Dominaria United released it in September 9th, 2022. This set features Domain as the main mechanic. If you don't know what Domain is, it's basically effects that cares about number of basic land types you have. For example, the Maria Outlander can do up to 5 damage to the opponent if you control all 5 basic land types. Because Domain is the main focus, splashing for other colors will be common in this format, so the archetypes of the stats are modular by each color, and for each color pair, you can just combine what each color is doing to get the archetype of the pair. So for example, you have blue as a spells matter, red as the aggro color, so combining together, you get blue-red being spells aggro, which is like a lot of the blue-red archetypes before. Also, Kicker comes back just like the previous Dominaria set, but this time, all Kicker costs are in different colors, giving players more incentive to splash for a different color so they can potentially make use of the Kicker mode. As for the lands, there are dual lands with the corresponding land type in each color pair in the common slot, in order to support the domain strategy. Since they're in common slot, you'll have a decent amount of opportunities to pick these lands up. Outside of lands, there are also spells that color fixes you. They are mostly in green, obviously, but even a blue spell like this Pixie Illusionist can help you splash and enable more domain count. This set looks pretty promising to play, and turns out, indeed it is. All sorts of strategies flourish in this format. You can play blue-red or red-white and be the fastest aggro deck in the West, or you can play green-based domain strategy, splashing a lot of spells in other colors and win the late game with lots of value. Plus, there's a strong incentive to increase domain counts and to splash for either good spells or kicker modes. Therefore, deciding between lands versus spells is also a pretty fun and engaging dynamic during the draft. And also, this set features a playable and good defender strategy, which is a breath of fresh air. There are defender cards and payoffs across multiple colors, and if with enough fixings, you can play all of them in the same defender decks that packs a huge punch. However, because of this defender strategy, it also gives birth to the boogeyman of this format, named Wing Metal Chaplain. This card can produce a lot of 1/1 flyers as long as you're playing enough defenders, and if you're playing against this card, you'll never feel good spending a removal on it because you still need to deal with the birds after this card's being removed. And even if you bite the bullets and spend the removal on the chaplain, if your opponents have any graveyard recursion like Obor's repossession, they can just get it back and replay it again, and you have to deal with this crap all over again. Also, the play order of this card doesn't matter. You can get a lot of birds right away with a lot of defenders on board, or you can play Chaplain first and then play other defenders for more birds. What's even more crazy is that a Chaplain can be tutored by a common, this Shieldboard Sentinel. When it enters, it just tutors for defender, and the Winged Mantle Chaplain is a defender, so you can just tutor the Chaplain with just this common. And also, this common is also a payoff for Chaplain, so yeah, here you go. All of these factors combined, making this Winged Mantle Chaplain an absurd card and an absolute menace. In my opinion, Winged Mantle Chaplain is the only bad apple of this almost perfect draft set. Still, even with the Boogeyman, I rank Dominaria United at S rank. This is the good retail draft experience with every strategy flourishing, and players can comfortably cast different color spells with enough fixings. Next up is The Brothers' War, released on November 18th, 2022, featuring the war between the brothers Urza and Mishra a long time ago. This is an artifact-heavy set with a lot of colorless cards that gives more benefits if you're playing the respective color. So for example, every deck can cast this Scrapyard Cohort or this Border Branch Golem, but you need white mana for the Cohort to unearth it, or you need the green mana for the Border Branch Golem so you can have access to the 4 mana mode. Also, with the unearth mechanic, there's a decent amount of graveyard focus in the set, and black-green is the Graveyard Matters archetype. Outside of those, there are also Power Stone tokens. Power Stone tokens were first introduced by Karn in Dominaria United, but there are very few cards that can make use of the Power Stone tokens, because the mana from it can only be spent on artifact spells or abilities, which were absent in Dominaria United. However, in the Brothers' War, there are a lot more Power Stone makers, and it's much easier to make use of these Power Stone mana due to the abundance of artifacts and activated abilities like Unearth. This set also features a bonus sheet called Retro Artifacts, featuring iconic colorless artifacts in old borders. Since they are all colorless, any deck can play these artifacts as long as they are worth being played in Limited. Then, how does this set fare? One of the cool things I want to see from this format is seeing the big robots fighting each other, but that didn't happen often because Simic, the color doing the big dumb artifact stuff, isn't doing well with a weaker Signpost uncommon and mediocre top ends. Outside of that, every other color pair is doing decently, with Boros Aggro and Azorius Soldiers being the dominant strategy. One important thing about this format is that splashing happens very often in this set due to the existence of Energy Refractor. Energy Refractor allows you to launder Power Stone mana and use it to cast spells that you couldn't use Power Stone mana before, or color fixes for splash color so you can unearth off-color cards or just cast other splash cards in general. Outside of Energy Refractor fixing for mana, more spells being colorless eases the mana issue players can potentially face, and there are a lot of unearthed cards acting as a great mana sink in the graveyard, so the players usually won't out of gas, and the game can feel very smooth. Speaking of unearth, we'll praise the GOAT of this format in this slide. These cards, Scrapyard Cohort, Scrapework Mutt, and Combat Courier, are strong cards in their respective color, but they don't limit you to those colors alone, so you can stay very open in your draft and still play these cards even you ended up in a completely different color. You can always cast these cards as long as you have enough lands, and they'll be waiting for you in the graveyard until you have the splash color for the unearth cost. If you're drafting in this format, consider to draft these cards highly. However, after the praising, here comes the bad apples. With colorless being a major focus in the main set and an entirely colorless bonus sheet, there are some mega powerful colorless bombs that every deck can play, especially this Wormkill engine. I believe a lot of Magic players know what this card does. and this card is basically unkillable unless you have exile removal. Therefore, pack opening luck plays a bigger role in this format because you need to pray for a good pack opening to see these bombs that no one's gonna pass and hope your opponent doesn't have them. Bomb shenanigans aside, people found out a secret deck after a couple months into this format, which is Seasonal Stalwart Splash All. Seasonal Stalwart is a 1-drop green creature that generates any color mana by tapping another artifact or creature, and there are a lot of permanents like Power Stones or creature tokens for Stalwart to tap. Therefore, Seasonal Stalwart decks can afford to splash for unearth cost, off-color removals, and even off-color bombs, and be very consistent at doing so. Overall, the Brothers War is a great format. It is smooth to play thanks to the prototype's model cost, unearthed mana sink, and the combination of Power Stone tokens plus Energy Refractor easing players' hand. However, the super strong colorless bombs in this format can easily generate feels bad moments as your opponent slams down something like a Wormcrow engine just because they are lucky enough to open it. Therefore, I give the Brothers War A tier. That's it for today's retail draft set review and tier list. In the next video, I'll cover Phyrexia All Will Be One and March of the Machines. Thank you guys so much for watching and see you in the next one.